Hey guys, thanks for joining in. My name is Michael. I'm here with Clear Estimates Customer Success. Just waiting a couple of minutes for viewers to join in with us, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining. While we're waiting, there should be a chat feature over on the right side of your screen. You might need to enter in your name in order to see that chat messenger, but then please just feel free to use that. Let us know if you're having any trouble with sound or anything like that. But then also, as we go along today, just feel free to add in any questions you have into the chat. We're going to be getting to as many of those as we can as we go along. And I'll probably have a dedicated Q&A at the end for anything remaining. I'm also going to be sharing a link if you would like to set up a one-on-one training call with us. That is included in your subscription, as well as the free trial. There's really no limit to those calls. So I'm going to be sharing out a link at the end if you would like to set up a one-on-one with us. But the idea here today is really just to give you a thorough walkthrough of Clear Estimates. So we're going to be talking about how to get started. We're going to be talking about how to navigate Clear Estimates. We're going to talk about how to search for parts, how to create an estimate. We're going to talk about saving time with templates. And then from there, we're going to build a very small sample job in Clear Estimates. I had a customer reach out, ask if we could cover a deck estimate this month. So that's what we're going to do as we're getting here deeper into the summer season. But we're going to build that kind of small sample job. We're going to talk about settings, and we're just going to give you a tour of the system overall. So if you're a newer customer, this should be a great introduction to Clear Estimates. And if you've been with us for a bit, this should be a really nice refresh on how to use the system and how to navigate Clear Estimates. So let me go ahead and stop my camera here. That way you can see the full slideshow. Let's go ahead and talk about Clear Estimates here for a second. So this is a great tool for any remodeler to streamline their estimating. It includes a library of locally sourced cost data that you can use to build your estimates, and it's cloud-based. So it's going to keep your estimates easy to access, organized, accurate, really a tremendous time saver when it comes to these estimates. Now, before we get into the application itself, it's really important to understand how the software is set up and how our library of remodeling costs really works. So just some core concepts to keep in mind as you're diving into Clear Estimates here. Number one, Clear Estimates is made up of what are called parts. Now, parts are line items. They're the building blocks of your estimate. They price out a specific task, like installing some framing, hanging drywall, maybe painting a wall. Really, any individual task that needs to get priced out in your project can be thought of as a part. And we offer a library of around 13,000 or so parts that you can use to build up your estimate. Now, each part in your library is going to contain cost data for the task itself. So that means material costs, labor rates, labor hours. And this data is locally sourced from the area you input when you sign up. You can adjust your location anytime if you did need to estimate in different cities or states. And Clear Estimates also comes with over 300 pre-built templates. Now, in Clear Estimates, a template is just a list of parts. They're really designed to save you time. So this way you're not searching for parts one by one. You're not forgetting anything you commonly need. Now, these templates are going to be intended kind of as a starting point for you to get 80 or 90% of the way through with your estimate. And then you're going to be able to fine tune them for what your job needs. So estimates are really just built up using parts and templates in Clear Estimates. Now, after we build our estimate, it's going to generate a proposal for us automatically. So it's going to save us the time of researching costs, typing out proposals. And with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into Clear Estimates here. Great. And when you first sign into Clear Estimates, you should be seeing something that looks just like this. This is the home page, and it's kind of your dashboard for recent estimates you've worked on. So your 5 most recent projects you've edited in any way, you're going to be able to see them here. These are all going to be the project titles. You can click these project titles and it'll open up any of these estimates. So it's going to show you recent estimates here right on the home screen. You can also click these customer names if you want to open up their customer profile. Each customer you add into Clear Estimates is going to have their own profile stored here in this customers tool. So I'm going to get to that in just a sec. You can also search through your whole backlog of projects and customers using this search bar here. So if you want to type in a customer name or a project title, it'll pull it up. This is also where we can start a new project. So you'll see a new project button right here. And there's a convenient tutorial, kind of a crash course on Clear Estimates, super handy tutorial there. Now, before we get into actually setting up a project here, I do want to give you a little bit of the layout of Clear Estimates, just so you understand where everything is and kind of how to think about the layout of Clear Estimates here. So up in the top left here, we're going to see 4 buttons: Home, Customers, Projects, and Reports. And the way you want to think about these 4 buttons is that they relate to a specific project we're working on. So here we can see I have Bob Homeowner 300 square foot deck open. And this is the project title I currently have open. So this lets us know which project is open. And then these 4 buttons always kind of relate to whatever project we're working on. So home is where we can pull up projects. It's also where we can start a new project. Customers is going to be our full backlog of customers. So every customer we add into Clear Estimates is going to have their own profile here. And then within their profile, there is going to be a series of job cards. So if we scroll down here, for example, these are all different projects. We can open these up just by clicking them. This is, by the way, also where you manage your customers' contact info and details that appear at the top of your proposals in this edit button. We're going to get into this a little later. Now, just to the right of the customers tool is the projects page here, and you'll see that this kind of looks like a briefcase. Now, this is where we're going to be spending most of our time in the presentation today, and it's also where you're going to spend most of your time in Clear Estimates. This is where we build the estimate, manage the estimate, all takes place right here on projects. And reports are where we're going to be able to export different styles of proposals, set up invoices, set up contract language, once again, all specific to a project we're working on. Now, up in the top right corner, you're going to see 4 blue buttons: Parts, Templates, Options, and Update. You want to think about these 4 buttons as account settings. These are all global, kind of account level settings for Clear Estimates. Parts tool, this is where you manage the library of cost data. It's not where you build an estimate, but it's where you could go in, you can add permanent custom parts into your library. This is also where you can adjust pricing that we provide on a permanent basis. That all takes place in Parts. Templates is template settings. So this is, once again, not where we're building an estimate, but where we can manage the settings for the templates in Clear Estimates, both the ones that we create and any that Clear Estimates provides. So in the templates tool, you could do something like take one of our templates, make a copy of it, customize it a little bit so you have your own unique copy of one of our templates. That's something you could do in templates. Again, not where we build an estimate, but just where we manage those settings. Options is going to be all of your account options. So this is going to be subscription settings, report settings, labor rates. We'll get into all of that in a little while. As well as things like integrations, account management, and what have you. That all takes place in options. And then update is where we're going to manage what location we're using for our pricing. So if you remember, we talked about we price out material and labor to over 400 locations nationwide. If we click update, we can see which location we're using. It would have asked you when you signed up what location you want to use for your pricing, but you're not locked into that. So I'm set up here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I could see that because I'm checked here in gray in the active column for Ann Arbor, and that lets me know I'm using Ann Arbor pricing. Now, if I wanted to estimate in a different city, that's no problem. So I can just click add location, search by city or zip. Right here, it's going to show us the closest locations available. And then we'd be able to click this plus to add a location into our list. And then once added, we can just click refresh and sync our library to a different location. This is forward facing. So if you've already set up an estimate, let's say in Cincinnati, and then we refresh to Ann Arbor, it's not going to sync our Cincinnati estimate with Ann Arbor pricing. So it's all forward facing. Just the next estimate we work on would use the location we set up here. So once again, that's an account level kind of setting there. And then at the very top of Clear Estimates, you'll see a couple of drop downs. Tools, this is where we can import and export parts. The support dropdown is where we're going to find support information. We do have a really comprehensive library of tutorials, support articles, webinars, super helpful information here. Down at the bottom, you'll see we have a community board and a feature request tool. This is great if you want to request a feature or vote on a feature that other customers have requested. You can do that there. And lastly, this what's new drop down here. This is all just going to be news, updates. If we release a new feature, you can find out info about that here. Also, every time we release a price update, you'll get news about that here. Just kind of an overview of what's changed and a link if you'd like some more information at the bottom. All right, so that gives you a little bit of a tour of Clear Estimates and the general layout and how you want to think about it. So let's go ahead. Sorry about that. Minor technical difficulty there. Hopefully everyone can see the screen again. Okay, great. So what we're going to do at this point is go ahead and jump in and start a new project. So let's go ahead and click New Project. Right here, we're on Home, by the way, and we're going to go ahead and click New Project right here. Now, when I click New Project, it's just going to ask for some details about the client. So first name, last name, email, project title, and description. So I'm just going to set up a dummy customer for us to work today. I'm going to call this John, homeowner. And then we'll give him just kind of a dummy email. It does ask for your client's email. It's going to use this to send out the proposal later. I'm just going to use a dummy one for our presentation today. And I'll just call this John at homeowner321.com. Just kind of a dummy email here. And then we're going to give this a title. I'm going to call this 300 square foot deck. And there's also project description field. This just gives you an opportunity to give a little more detail, kind of an overall project description. So if I wanted to say something like 300 square foot cedar deck, build and stain, really any kind of descriptor you want to give it. So next I'm going to go ahead and click continue. Now when I click continue, I'm going to see this new window pop up, and it's going to ask me a question. Will this project contain multiple components? So great question. What does that mean? So in Clear Estimates, a component is an organizational feature. It's used to organize a proposal by room or by phase. So let's say we had a kitchen and a bath in the same estimate. Maybe we want those line items organized under each room and maybe a subtotal for each room. So that's exactly what a component will do. Now you could set this up ahead of time. When you're first setting up the project, we can say yes, tell it how many rooms or sections, and name them and create them right in the beginning. But just to keep it simple for right now, I'm going to say no. And I'll show you in a little bit how you can add these in. You don't have to do this right at the beginning. You can always come back later and add components if you'd like. So let's go ahead and click continue. This is going to take us into the projects page, which, like I said, is where you spend most of your time in Clear Estimates. Projects page is where we build the estimates, where we manage the estimate. Really, anytime you're estimating a job, you want to be right here on projects. Now, before we get into the process for adding parts and templates, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of the layout of the projects page, just so you know where everything is. Like I said, you're going to be spending most of your time here. So top left of the projects page, we're going to see our project title. Keep in mind, we can always click this and edit it. So if I wanted to change my project title, if I wanted to say cedar deck or something like this, I can change that project title right up here. Same thing with the description. You can just click into that and make adjustments. Over on the right, you're going to see a handful of tools for when you're building your estimate. The most important of which is this blue eyeball button right here, View Report. This is how you're going to preview your proposal before you send it off to your customer. So really important to just kind of take a look at that before you send it out. And you can always do that from View Report, print to PDF. You can also save these to Word. Once you're ready to send your estimate to your client, you can do that from Send to Customer and Send Report to Customer. So we'll do that in a little bit. Export project, this is where you can export the details of your estimate to different formats. Usually this is for your own records keeping. Typically, these documents aren't going to be as client-facing as the proposal that you see in View Report, but the export docs are just more detailed breakdowns, so kind of more of a column view breakout of material versus labor versus subcontractor cost and what have you. So you can save those to PDF, Word, or Excel. This export dropdown is also where, if you're a pro user, you can export to Buildertrend, or it's where really any customer can export to QuickBooks. In the More dropdown, we're going to find even more tools such as Duplicate Project. This is a super handy feature if you're doing a lot of similar jobs. Why build the same estimate twice if you can just make a duplicate, make a few changes, and get that out the door? So super handy feature there. We can also archive projects when we're done with them. You can even save completed projects as a template. So very handy time saver there as well. This is also where we can create and view invoices on the job. Just so you know, we're not going to get too much into invoicing today. I do have a webinar we did on invoicing. I'm going to share a link to that at the end. But we could spend a whole hour just on invoicing. And then beyond that, let's go ahead and move down the page a little bit. Right here at the top, you're going to see a couple of buttons and a search bar. And this is what I like to call the part search interface. And this is how we're going to build the estimate. This is how we can search for parts by name. Browse Part Library button is actually going to open up the full catalog of cost data from Clear Estimates. So you can kind of go through the library of costs, find what you need, and add them in. Create Custom Part is how we can add in our own line item. This is great if you just want to add something in very quickly, or if there's something you can't find in the library, you can create your own items and really define any description and cost that you'd like. And lastly, there's add template, which, like I was saying, we have about 300 or so pre-built templates, just a great starting point for an estimate. So we're going to cover all of this here. Once we start adding parts into this project, they're going to land right here in this project parts window. And we'll be able to see and manage all of the parts in our estimate here once we add some. Below that is your markup tool. This is how you account for your own profit. None of the costs in Clear Estimates include markup. They're all pre-markup, pre-tax costs. So you can use these markup toggles to add in an extra percentage for your own profit and markup and overhead. So it's all based on percentage for material and labor costs, and you can sort of set those percentages right here, and those will get totaled into the project cost. Below that, there's going to be alternates and components. Components are what we were just talking about. This is how you can. Great. Sorry, everyone. Keep losing the screen share here today. I think we might be having some connectivity issues, but what I was just saying is below the markup tools, you're going to see alternates and components. And these are, like I was saying, components are subsections of your estimate. It's a way you can sort of organize the estimate by room or by phase. You can have sort of different sections for, let's say, bedroom 1, bedroom 2, bedroom 3. And we're going to show you these in a bit. Alternates are very similar, except they don't get included in the project cost. These are for building change orders on the estimate. And it's also for if you wanted to show some options to a client on the proposal. So also a subsection of the estimate that just doesn't get included in the project cost. We'll get into that kind of toward the end as well. Last thing here is miscellaneous items. This is for things like sales tax, discounts, really any extra percentage you want to add into your project. Our part costs don't include sales tax, so you would want to add in maybe a miscellaneous item for sales tax, so that gets included in your project cost. Great, so that gives you a layout of the projects page. And at this point, we're just going to go ahead and check in with the audience, see if any questions have come in so far. I'm not seeing anything. So great. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start talking about how to start building an estimate. And we're going to do this very simple. We're going to start with just adding single parts into the project. And then we're going to move into templates. And then from there, we're actually going to build our mock estimate here. We have a deck we're going to be building. This is a takeoff list I set up for it. And we're going to use that to build the project. But first, let's just talk about the very basics of adding parts to your estimate. Now, of course, there is this search bar. So if I wanted to just click into this search bar and begin typing, I can search for terms and have parts pop up. So I could search drywall, and it's going to return me all kinds of results for drywall parts. But what I'd recommend starting with is Browse Part Library. And the reason I recommend starting with this is because it's a little more straightforward how you can just navigate through rather than scrolling through long lists of parts. You can actually kind of sort through the categories of cost data and find what you need a little simpler here. So if I select this category dropdown in Browse Part Library, it's going to show us all of the categories that make up Clear Estimates Part Library. And everything really is categorized on a very basic level by scope of work. Should also be roughly chronological to the way you'd be thinking about the work in the actual job, right? So we're starting off with project prep. Then there's going to be a bunch of different cost categories for different types of demolition. Further down, we get into the building portions, things like concrete for foundations and masonry and framing and roofing and gutters and exterior and interior doors, windows, decks, skylights, and what have you. So there's so much kind of built into it already and all set to go here. Now, what you can do for any of these categories, we can go ahead and click it. So let's go ahead and click 10 wall framing. Let's just say we wanted to price out some wall framing in this estimate. We're going to go ahead and grab 10 wall framing. And when we select that, it's going to show us all of the parts that are built into 10 wall framing. So we can see the part description. We can see the category information here in the middle. And then on the far right, we're going to have the cost data. So in the cost column, we're seeing the cost per unit for material. So for example, this first part, 2x4, 16-inch on center wood frame wall up to 8 feet tall, 83 cents per square foot. That's going to be our material cost. And then in this hours per unit column, we're going to see the labor hours that are built into the part. So that lets you know labor cost is included as well. So it's the labor hours per unit as well as the material cost per unit here. Now, you might notice there's just so many parts built into 10 wall framing, and you might think to yourself, well, I don't want to scroll through all this. Well, that's no problem. That's why we have these other drop downs up here at the top, so you can kind of narrow your search. So under each category of parts in Clear Estimates, there are subcategories that let you get more specific. So under 10 wall framing, I can sort by wood wall framing, sheathing, columns, knee wall, furring, and so on. So let me go ahead and grab wood wall framing here. And we're in 10 wall framing. And now I'm just looking at wood wall framing parts. And then a lot of times you can use part groups to get even more specific. So for wood wall framing parts, I have 2x4s, 2x6, 2x8s. Let me go ahead and grab 2x4. And now I'm looking at a much smaller list of parts here for me to choose from. And so then at this point, I would just kind of go through the list and find what I need. So let's say I did want to go ahead and grab this part, 2x4, 16-inch on center wood frame wall up to 8 feet tall. What I'll do is I'm just going to click this part with my mouse, and that's going to pull up this part preview. Now, in the most basic sense, all I need to do as an estimator at this point is just plug in my quantity. So it helps to have your measurements all set to go so you know how much of everything you need. In this case, it's looking for the wall area, so kind of the length times the height of the wall. And let's just say, for example, we needed to price out 80 square feet of wall framing. We're going to plug that right into this blue quantity bar. That's going to price out material and labor. Once again, pre-markup, pre-tax here. And then we're going to go ahead and add the part. Perfect. A little bit of a delay there. Like I said, I think we're having some connectivity issues here. But that's really just that simple. We just sort of clicked the part, we plugged in our quantity, and then we added the part into the job. Now there's more you can do here though. So let's do another example. Let's say I wanted to price out some let's say we wanted to price out some drywall, just for example. So I'm going to click this category dropdown again. Also keep in mind, you can kind of quickly filter through categories. So, most of the drywall costs are in either wall coverings or ceiling coverings. So if I just type in coverings here, it's just going to filter those categories, and then I can quickly grab wall coverings. And then keep in mind, when you select one of these categories, if you then want to just click up into the search bar and type in something like drywall, now we're only looking at wall coverings parts for drywall, and that makes it just a little more simple as well. So that search bar is especially helpful if you selected a category already and then you search a term. But what I'm going to do is just go ahead and pull up some drywall. And let's just say this was moisture resistant drywall. And then we have a couple of parts for that. I'm going to go ahead and click this part, install 1/2-inch drywall taped and finished, moisture resistant. And keep in mind, when we're adding these parts, we can make on-the-fly customizations to the part before we ever add it to the estimate. This does not change the default settings for the line item in our library. So it gives you this flexibility to really change anything you'd like about the item and then add the cost into your estimate. And you can really change anything you'd like. It's not going to override the default settings. So what I'm going to do is just kind of walk through this entire tool with you and tell you what everything does here. Just in case you do want to customize any items that you're adding into your project. So up here at the top, you're going to see that this part has this description field. You can think of this description here at the top as kind of your internal Clear Estimates description. There is kind of a character limit here because it's built to fit into your part search. But this is really just the description for the item you see in Clear Estimates. What actually shows up on reports for your clients is going to be down here in report text. And you'll notice that there's 3 different boxes here: preliminary, formal, and subcontractor, and that they all have preloaded text for this specific item in my estimate. What they are, preliminary is a proposal that just doesn't include as much detail. It doesn't include unit types, it doesn't include exact quantities, and it's usually used for a rough kind of initial estimate. And then there's also this subcontractor proposal. This is just basically the same scope of work, but with no project cost. That way a sub could give you a cost to do the work. But most commonly, you're going to use the formal proposal. When we're looking at that view report button here on the projects page, that's going to be the proposal we'd see is the formal proposal. This is what gets sent to your client from send to customer. So if you want to adjust the language for one, So if you want to adjust the language for one of your items on your proposal, you could do that right here in this formal text box. Keep in mind there's going to be some insert buttons that will insert various information about the part, provide an install, quantity, unit type, and part description, and it would just autofill that information. When you click part description, it would just kind of autofill this description from the top. So that's how report text works, and it's convenient because this means you can add a part to a project once, and then there's 3 separate styles of proposals you can automatically print from the estimate. Just below that description is going to be the unit type, and this tells you how the part is priced out. So for example, this part, we have a cost per square foot from Clear Estimates. And we can see that down here in material, how there's a specific material calculator. We're seeing 74 cents for material. That means it's 74 cents per square foot. So it's already got a unit type sort of defined. Now you can customize the part if you wanted to, let's say at a linear foot cost for installing drywall. You could change this unit type over to something else. Just keep in mind it's not a conversion calculator. It's not going to change the square foot cost into a linear foot cost. You would have to just come down here and redefine what that material cost is. But you can certainly switch between those. In the unit types, square foot, this is commonly seen for things like framing and drywall and flooring. Linear foot, this is typically you're going to see things like baseboard or anything that goes around the perimeter of the room is typically priced by linear foot. Cubic yards, this is going to be things like earthworks and debris removal. You'll see a cubic yard cost for a lot of those. Piece is kind of your catch-all for anything not priced by square foot, linear foot, or cubic yard. You'll see this a lot for things like doors or windows or sinks, or really anything you just need one of is usually priced by piece. And so just give you a little overview of these different unit types. And then below that, we have the different cost calculators in the part. So again, there's 3 separate ones: material, labor, and subcontractor. The material calculator, it's going to show your cost per unit for material right here. And just keep in mind, it's going to multiply this by the part quantity. So if I put in 100 square feet of drywall here, it's going to take 74 cents, multiply that by my square footage, and give me a material cost. Below that's going to be the labor calculation. And what we do is we provide hours per unit, labor hours per unit. So what happens here is it's going to take this figure here, and it's going to multiply it by the part quantity that you input. And then it's going to multiply that again by a labor rate. So you can almost kind of imagine sort of an invisible triangle here. This is how the hours per unit calculation works. So it's just a number of labor hours that gets multiplied by the square footage, and then once again by a labor rate. Now you can customize labor rates. If you click this little drop down here, you can select a different rate from in your account. In your options tool is going to be all of your default account rates, and you can edit them there. And I'll try to get to that toward the end. But you can always choose a different labor rate. You can actually click into this labor rate column and just plug something in if you want. It'll let you do that. It'll warn you that it's not the typical value or the default value for the part, but you can really just kind of adjust your labor cost however you'd like here. There's a couple of different options too. Maybe you don't want to use labor hours. If you click where it says hours per unit in blue here, you can change the calculation type for labor cost. So let's say we had a cost per square foot for labor. I can actually switch this over to dollar per unit and then just say, you know what, I just want to charge $2 per square foot for labor. Don't want to worry about a labor rate. Don't want to figure anything like that out. It's just $2 per square foot. And then we see that reflected here. There's more options too. So if you just wanted to plug in a flat cost and just sort of add in a lump sum cost for something like labor, you could do this for material as well and just say, you know what, it's going to be 500 in labor cost, regardless of the quantity, regardless of the labor rate. I'm just plugging in 500 and it's just going to be a static flat cost of 500. And lastly, if we just wanted to multiply a number of hours by a labor rate, we know this is going to take us 2 hours to do it. We can just plug that in, multiply that way. Do want to apologize sincerely. We keep losing our screen share today. I think we're having some kind of either connectivity issues or it might be a problem with the screen share tool, but I'm going to just try to stay on top of that. I got my eye on the screen here. So sorry for the occasional interruptions we seem to be running into today. Lastly, there is subcontractor cost option. This is optional. None of the costs we provide to you are assumed to be sourced from a sub. So if you have a sub that you're working with and you just want to plug in their costs, you can uncheck these different cost types, which also, by the way, makes it really easy to customize the part. Let's say we were doing a labor-only estimate, for example, we could just uncheck material. But maybe we wanted to uncheck material or labor or both, and then just plug in a subcontractor cost for this. We would just enable the subcontractor cost, If we know what their cost per unit is, we can plug that in. I think more commonly with a subcontractor, they've probably given you just a total price to do the job. So in that case, you might just want to choose lump sum here and say, my sub gave me a price rather of $800 to do this work. We're just going to plug that in here as our lump sum. So you can really kind of fine tune these parts however you'd like and then add them into your project. And once again, if we click that part again, it's the same part it was originally before we customized it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in the estimate to make those adjustments. All right, checking in with the audience quick, see if there's any questions so far. Not seeing anything. So let's just take a look at what we did here. So I'm going to close out of the Browse Part Library tool. And we can see we have a couple of items we added here into our estimate. We see the description, the quantity. Keep in mind, a lot of these columns are clickable. So if I just wanted to make quick adjustments to my part quantities, I can do that here. Same thing with material and labor cost. We want to make quick adjustments to that. We're able to do that. And of course, you can also just click this pencil over on the far right and open the part right back up and continue to make adjustments however you need. This trash can will delete the parts from your estimate. And then keep in mind, you can also adjust descriptions from this description column if you need. Great. So now that we've added some parts to the project, we can kind of see what's going on here. So we have our actual project total. So this is the total before markup. Below that in blue text is going to be the dollar amount of markup being applied. So remember, that comes from this markup tool. We set this based on a percentage. And that right here in blue text, we're going to be able to see the markup percentage. And then down here in orange is going to be the base bid. So this is the number the client sees. So it never shows your client your markup. It just kind of rolls that into the total project cost here. Cool. So the next thing I wanted to cover was just maybe kind of give you a crash course on how to use templates, and then we're going to get into this deck finally. So let's go ahead and just kind of talk about templates for a second. Once again, templates, they're just sort of pre-built estimates, kind of starter estimates. They're designed to get you 80 or 90% of the way through with the job or a section of the job, and then you can fine tune them for what your job needs. When you want to add a template to the project, you want to be right here on the projects page and find this Add Template button right here. So when I click Add Template, it's going to pull up this new window. And you'll see that there's this select a category dropdown. So very similar to the parts, the templates are also categorized. So there's going to be templates for additions, bathrooms, demolition, decking, kitchens, floor systems. Further down, you get into room remodels like basements or bedrooms or living area, roofing and gutters and what have you. So there's plenty built in here, about 300 or so pre-built templates. So let's say we wanted to take a look at some bathroom templates. I'm going to go ahead and select bathroom. And then using this middle dropdown, I can select a specific type of bathroom template. So this will show me all of the templates available for bathrooms. You're going to see some smaller templates in here for things like replacement work. So tub door replacement, tub replacement, exhaust fan, shower surround, and what have you. Further down, we get into complete new build bathroom templates. And then below that are some remodel templates in a couple of different grades. And this just refers to the quality of materials here. So let's say, for example, we wanted to take a look at this template, bathroom remodel, average grade. We're going to go ahead and click that. And what you'll see is when we click this template title, now it's going to show us all of the parts that make up this specific template down here, and we can see them all here. And what you'll see is that it's all just a list of suggested parts that are commonly seen in this kind of a bathroom remodel. And it's going to try to cover as much ground as possible. So we're looking at costs for things like demo. We're looking at plenty of different items for plumbing, for things like sinks and vanities and toilets. And then further down, we're getting into things like electrical work, wall coverings for things like drywall, as well as ceramic tile walls and what have you. And then further down, we get into things like flooring materials, tile flooring, and painting. So it's going to try to cover as much ground as possible, but you do want to think about a template as a starting point. It's just designed to save you time since every job's a little different. That said, what's really cool about these templates is that all of these parts that you see in the Clear Estimates templates have special formulas attached to them that tie back to this template quantity that you see right up here. So what this allows me to do as an estimator is just click into this template quantity and say, okay, I've got a 90 square foot footprint on that bathroom. I'm just going to plug in the square footage of my bathroom here and click calculate quantities just below. And what that's going to do is it's going to use those formulas to figure out suggested part quantities for each of the parts in the template based on a 90 square foot bathroom. So it's meant to get you in the ballpark. What you want to do at this point is double check all these quantities against what you have in a set of plans or in a takeoff list like this, and make any adjustments as needed. So let's say, you measured, it's actually 75 square feet of ceramic tile floor that needs to get pulled out. You can just very quickly make those adjustments right here in the template. We haven't added this template to the job yet. We're just kind of staging it, getting it ready, fine-tuning it to add into the job. Now, let's say there was something in the template that we didn't need. So let's say maybe a different contractor was coming by to do all the electrical and we didn't need to price that out in our project. You can also uncheck any of these parts that are not going to be relevant to your estimate using these check boxes here on the left. And this just makes it so those don't get added in with the rest of the list. So you can kind of see, you can go through, you can adjust any quantities, you can remove any parts you're not going to need. And then if there's something that you do need that isn't in the template, once we go ahead and add this into the job, we'll then be able to go into the part library, find anything else remaining, and just save us the time of searching for all of these parts. So once everything looks good, you'd have some choices in terms of where to add the template. It's going to show you the approximate total of the template right here. And then you can add it in the main window as an alternate if you wanted to use it for a change order, as a component if you wanted to create a section of the estimate using the template, or if you have a section already set up, you can add them to existing sections. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this to main window. And when I click add template here in the bottom right, you're going to see it's going to copy and paste this entire template into my project. And then from here, I could, of course, go through, make any further adjustments, adjust any quantities, make any changes, add more parts from the library. And so that's pretty much how templates work. And we are going to use a template to help build our job today. Really quick before we dive into this deck project, just going to check in with the audience, see if there's any questions that have come up so far. Not seeing too much coming in yet. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these parts in my project, and let's get us a clean start to our deck estimate today. And to do that, keep in mind, like I said, you can delete parts one by one using this trash can, but there's also these check boxes if you want to do any bulk actions in your project. So you can actually select multiple items, and this is going to enable this kind of actions button. And this is cool because this is going to let you move parts around to different sections of your estimate or to different projects. You can make copies of parts in bulk, and you can also delete in bulk. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to use this top checkbox. This is going to select all of the parts in my estimate, and then I'm going to go actions and delete, and this will allow me to bulk delete the whole project. Just be careful when you're doing this. Don't accidentally delete all the parts in your project here. Great, so now we've got a clean slate here. We can start on this deck build. And so this is the deck we're going to build today. This is a takeoff list. I put this together at the client's house, just kind of went through, we did a consultation, figured out all the dimensions, sort of drew up some plans, and then I created this takeoff list based on those. And this just makes it easy to estimate and clear estimates if you already have your measurements and quantities sort of defined. So this is what we're going to build here today. It's a 300 square foot. It's going to be a floating deck. It's going to be cedar. And then we're actually going to come back and stain the deck after 6 weeks. So we're going to use both parts and templates to build out this estimate. The deck template isn't going to include every single thing that we're going to need to price out in this takeoff, but that's why we kind of emphasize that those templates are just a starting point. So we are going to build this estimate out with the help of one of these templates. And there's a lot to do here. We got a little bit of prep work. We're going to be doing some framing. We're also going to be installing a railing, steps, some painting work, and then we're also going to be doing some cleanup. So let's go ahead and start up here at the very top of my takeoff. I need to pass on costs for a set of plans, building permit, and travel costs as far as my prep work goes. So I'm going to head back into Clear Estimates. First thing I'm going to do, click Browse Part Library. Now, most of the prep work I'm going to need is going to be found right here in Project Preparation. So I'm going to go ahead and grab Project Prep. And then I'm going to use this middle drop down. And the first thing I needed was a set of plans for this job. Now I've estimated it's going to be roughly 16K. So I'm going to search through my list. Here is plans on-site survey, 14 to 16,000 project costs. So I'm going to click that part. And how many of these sets of plans am I going to need? Probably just the one. So I'm just going to leave that at quantity 1, add part. We also needed that building permit fee. So I'm going to click my middle drop down here again. We're going to switch that over to building permit fee. Same idea here, rough range of cost, about 14 to 16K, and we're going to add that in. And then we also wanted to pass on time and fuel for the travel. This particular homeowner lives a little bit far away, and we're going to be coming to the site a couple of times here. So we just want to pass on some of those travel costs. Now there is a line item here if I just want to search travel. We do have something in our library here, travel charge. It's 15-minute increments. So each quantity one is 15 minutes. So if I wanted to price out half hour of travel time, I could just do quantity two. But I think this is a good opportunity to show you how you can just very quickly create your own part. So for my travel cost here, my travel charge, I'm going to go ahead and grab create custom part. And this is how you can just quickly add in your own line item into the estimate. There's two ways you can do this. You could do this in simple mode, and this is really easy. You just select a category, plug in a description and cost, and save. And you can also click standard, and this is going to give you all of those calculators we were looking at before. In this case, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to add this particular line item into my project prep item, project prep category, and I'll just call this travel charge, and I'll just charge them $150 for labor, and we'll save that. Great, so now we've got those couple of items added into my project. Now keep in mind, if I didn't want this to be first, these dots over on the far left will let me rearrange parts in my project. You can you'll see it's gonna give you this little red indicator where it's gonna drop the part and then you can drop it. What's important to remember about that, you'll see all of these parts are in project prep, and you can only rearrange parts within a specific part category. So if I had some demolition costs in this project, it wouldn't let me take my building permit and drop it into those. However, you can always make quick on-the-fly adjustments to the part category. So for whatever reason I wanted to do that, we can just customize the category, and then it would let us drag it wherever we wanted. So just wanted to mention that. You can also kind of rearrange what order these lines fall. So that's all my prep work. So let's get into the framing costs. So we're going to be doing a couple of things here. We're going to be digging some footings. We're going to be adding some concrete tubes, filling those with concrete. Then we're going to be installing some posts in those. We're going to be installing some joists as well as cedar deck band. Now, what I could do if I wanted, I could go into Browse Part Library here. There is a specific decks category right here. It's number 18, decks and porches. And all of those costs are included in this category. So we're going to see specific subcategories for framing, for things like posts and joists and band. But I kind of want to save myself a little bit of time here. So for most of this deck, I'm going to use one of the pre-built deck templates to kind of get ourselves a little further along. So once again here, I'm going to click Add Template. And I'm going to use my Select Category dropdown. We're just going to find some decks. And in this case, it's a cedar deck, and it's going to be a floating deck. So let's see what we have for cedar. And it's going to be 300 square feet. So we have a couple of deck templates here, and you'll notice they have different ranges of square footage here. And the reason for that is the template part formulas that determine how much of the part to add they are pretty dependent. Sorry about that. They're pretty dependent on how big the deck is, right? So there's going to be a lot more waste factor in a smaller deck than there is in a larger deck. So that's why there's different kind of ranges here. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and grab deck cedar over 180 square feet since it is a 300 square foot floating deck here. Now I've clicked that, and now we can see there's a handful of items in this deck template. I'm going to go ahead and plug in that square footage here. So that's the surface square footage of my deck, 300 square feet, and calculate. And now we've got some suggested quantities for each of these parts. So I'm going to go ahead and compare these to what I've got in my deck takeoff here and just make sure all of the quantities are correct for what I need and that everything I need is included. So let's start with this first item, dig 36-inch footing and add concrete tubes. We also needed to fill 10-inch tubes with concrete. Now let me take a look in here. We have no parts in this template for digging the footing. And I think the reason for that is because there's a lot of different situations, a lot of different dimensions of footings you might need. So it's going to give you the kind of the power to go back in the library and choose the ones we want. Since I don't have anything in the template for digging the footings or filling them with concrete, I'm going to go ahead and mark this on my takeoff. I want to look through the library later, find parts for that and add it in. But let's see what else we have here. So I do need to make sure I have install cedar posts in concrete and 13 of them. And I need to make sure my dimensions match up. So let me take a look. And first part here is install cedar posts, 4x4, 8-inch tall in concrete. So this works really well, and it has exactly the number I need here. Keep in mind, these template formulas are based on actual contractor projects that have been surveyed. So they've been pretty dialed in over time. So this actually works for what I need here. Next, install joists, 2x10 doubled, and 300 square feet of those. And I do have a part right here up top, 300 square feet of deck joists, and it's exactly the dimensions I need. But if it wasn't, I would just uncheck this and find a different joist. All right, let's see what's next. Cedar deck band, 60 linear feet of a 1x10 band here. So let's make sure we've got a 1x10 band, and we do, and it's 60 linear feet just like I need. And then we have our deck surface at 300 square feet. We can just kind of assume that's correct there. So I will double check my dimensions, make sure that matches up, and that'll work. So next we have some railings, 42-inch tall deck railing with pickets. I need 52 linear feet of each. Let's see what we've got in here. And I do have a part that kind of works here, install deck railing with pickets. So you'll see this a lot. A lot of the parts in Clear Estimates are kind of, you can think of them as assemblies where they're going to include all of the costs for a specific task. So in this case, it includes the railing, the pickets, all of the materials. But it's suggesting 54 linear feet. And if I look at my takeoff, I have 52 linear feet that I measured. So slight difference there. So I'm just going to go ahead and make an adjustment there for the railing. I only need 52 linear feet of railing. All right, so that's railing, that's pickets. How about deck steps? We need 4 cedar steps. We're going to be open riser. And I do have a part for install cedar step with open riser, but there's closed riser parts in the library. If I needed a different kind of riser, I can just uncheck this. Different kind of step, I should say. I can always uncheck this, add a different step from the library. And it's 4 of them, so that's just what I needed. So I just made one small adjustment to one of these parts. Everything else kind of looks like it's going to match up with a lot of what I have here. But that's the end of my template list, and we still have a couple of things that need to get priced out. So you can see the template just kind of gives us a starting point. We can kind of set this up, stage it, get it ready, and it just saves us the time of finding these items. So this should be a great starting point. I'm going to go ahead and add this into the project here. And that's going to go ahead and copy and paste that entire template here. But we're still not done. So we still have all of this paint work we have to do. We're going to be staining the deck as well as some finalization work. We're going to be dumping some debris and doing some cleanup outside. And then, of course, we also have these 2 items that I still haven't priced out under framing. So this is going to be dig 36-inch footing rather, and add concrete tubes. So I'm going to come back into Clear Estimates. Let's get this into our estimate. I'm going to go ahead and type in dig footing. And a handful of items come up. And let's just double check what I need here. So it's going to be 36-inch footing. And it's going to be 10-inch tubes. And these are more of those assembly parts where I see the tube and digging the footing is all included as one cost. So let's see here, 36-inch, place 12-inch tube. All right, dig footing up to 36 inches, place 10-inch tube, pour with concrete. And that's just exactly what I need. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and grab that. We are going to need, I believe, 13 of those. So we'll plug in 13 here as our quantity, add part. And that takes care of these 2 different items. So next I had down here at the bottom some painting work I still haven't priced out. So this is going to be deck staining. I'm going to come back into Clear Estimates. And right now I'm kind of in search mode. And keep in mind you can always click browse parts over here in the top right of the search. And you can kind of toggle these back and forth between search and browse. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into browse here, and let's go ahead and surf down to exterior paint. And what we're looking for is some deck staining right now. Using my middle drop down, I'm just going to type in deck. Let's actually type in stain deck. Great. So now we have stained deck and porch floor, railing, and steps. So let's start off with the deck flooring here, the deck surface. So I'm going to stain deck porch floor. And it's going to be a brush. We're going to use that kind of an application and 2 coats, 300 square feet of that. So let's see what we've got for brush in 2 coats right here. And that's going to be 300 square feet of deck surface. So I'm going to plug that into my quantity. That's going to price out my costs. Let's add that part in. I also have stained deck railing with a brush in 2 coats here. So let's go back into stained deck. Here's the railing. Brush 3 coats. I need brush 2 coats right here. Brush 2 coats. And I measured it's going to be 189 square feet of deck railing. And we're going to add that part in. Now we need to stain the steps. It's going to be a roll, and it's 2 coats. So we're going to roll on 2 coats of stain there for the steps. And it's going to be 16 square feet of steps. So let's see, roll. We're looking for 2 coats here. Oh, wait, I think that was brush. Nope, that was roll, 2 coats. Great. And what was my square footage? 16. So we're going to plug that in as 16. So you can see I'm just kind of referencing the takeoff and then using that to plug my measurements or my quantities into each of these parts. We add them into the project. And then lastly is going to be just a little bit of cleanup work. We're going to be dumping debris, and we're also going to be cleaning up the work site. Most of that stuff's going to land in finalization. So that's category number 37 for project finalization. Middle drop down here, we're going to find load, haul, and dump debris. And keep in mind, there's plenty of other finalization, for things like dumpster, cleaning labor, general cleaning, as well as budgetary items and cleaning supplies, all here in finalization. In this case, we're just going to grab load, haul, and dump debris. And then how much debris do I need to remove? I'm looking at 4 to 5 cubic yards I've estimated here. So let's go ahead and grab this one. Load, haul, and dump clean construction debris, 4.5 cubic yards. Now, sometimes you'll see it where it actually tells you the quantity right in the part description. And when you see that, these parts are almost universally priced by the piece. And what that means is quantity 1 of these parts accounts for 4.5 cubic yards of debris removal. So I can just add this in as quantity 1 and call it a day. Or if I wanted to estimate 9 cubic yards, I could do quantity 2. So this might get confusing if you're a new customer. Keep in mind, if it actually says what the quantity is in the description, that just means add in quantity 1, and that's how much it accounts for. So let's go ahead and add that in. And then we had a little bit of cleanup work. I'm just going to surf down to general cleaning. And then in my part groups, I should have deck or porch cleanup in different square footages. Same idea here. We see kind of a range of square footages for some of these parts, 100 to 150, 150 to 200. Those are all priced by the piece. Here where you see it says deck or porch cleanup over 250 square feet, that's where it's going to actually let us plug in a square footage. So same idea here where it actually defines what that quantity is right in the part description. So I'm going to grab this one over 250. We're just going to add in 300 square feet of cleanup, and then we'll add that part in. Great. So I think that's just about everything we needed to price out for this deck. We're still not done here though. So before I send this off to a customer, there's going to be a couple of things I'll want to check. Now, number 1 is going to be the markup. We want to take a look at these costs, see what the cost is. Do we want to make any adjustments? Do we still need to make any adjustments to the parts? And kind of review it at this point. Now, as far as markup, the system defaults to a 50% markup. That's not a suggestion. It's just kind of the system default. You can really account for markup however you see fit. We do have some resources on that. If you're interested, I'll share our contact info. I can send those over to you. But this is how you can just define your markup percentage. So double check your markup here before you send it out to a client. Make sure that final price looks good. And before we send this out, we also want to just preview that proposal. So to do that, I'm going to find this eyeball button up here, view report and print to PDF. And this will pull up the proposal that we'll be able to send over to the homeowner. Perfect. So this is the formal proposal. When I signed up, I plugged in my logo. I'll show you how to adjust that here in a second. Below that is my submitted to and by section. So that's my client's contact info as well as my own. One of the things I'm going to want to do here is plug in John's address, make this look a little more professional, add his contact info here. Below that, I have a paragraph of legal language I've included with all of my proposals. I'm going to show you how to set this up. If you want to add in your own contract to appear up at the top, you can certainly do that. And then below that, we're getting into the contents of the estimate itself. And you can see that we didn't type any of this in. We didn't look up these costs. Clear Estimates just automatically produces a sentence of text that explains the project in detail to your homeowner. And it's even kind of organized by scope of work here. So very readable, very easy for them to understand. And then we have our total project cost down here. Now, one thing I want to do is add in a line for sales tax. So we're going to do that. And then there's a convenient place my client can sign the agreement. So let's make a couple adjustments here before we send this out. So first thing I wanted to do was add in John's contact info. So to do that, I'm just going to head back into my project. Then I'm going to click customers. It's going to know what customer I'm working with. So it's going to pull John's profile right up. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab edit. And then I can just plug in his street address. And we can plug in his phone. And if you ever wanted to add multiple phones or multiple emails, maybe the homeowners are maybe a married couple and you want to have both of their contact info on there, you can add in multiple phones. Maybe you have a couple of different clients who own a few different properties. You want to have a couple of different phones and emails. You can always add more emails and phones. But I'm going to go ahead and save that. I just added in his address and his phone. And then the other thing I wanted to do here before I send this out was add in a line for sales tax. And then I'll get into some of these settings here. But to add sales tax, what I'm going to do, scroll down to the very bottom of my project here, and we're going to go ahead and find miscellaneous items. And we're going to go ahead and click the plus to create an item. This is super simple to do. It just needs a description and a value. So I'm going to plug in sales tax. And then over here, I can choose between a dollar amount or a percentage. I'm going to set this up based on a percentage, and I'm going to call it a 6% sales tax here. Now you'll see there's a drop down if you want to choose where your item calculates. You can do this based on the actual total cost before markup. You can also do it based on the base bid, which is the final number after markup. You could do it based on the markup total, or you could do it based on material, labor, or sub-cost, either with or without markup here. So I'm just going to leave that at actual total cost. But just keep in mind, you can use these items for a lot of different things. I see some clients who do kind of like cost plus estimating, use miscellaneous items to show a profit margin, for example. That's another use case. This is also great for discounts since you can actually plug in negative values here and have it deduct as well. But in this case, I'm just going to add in 6% sales tax and we'll save. Keep in mind, it's going to show us the value of the item right here. So that's $800 I wouldn't want to leave on the table. So we went ahead and grabbed that sales tax item, added that into our estimate. And let's go ahead and preview this proposal one more time. Just make sure everything looks good. View report and print to PDF. And this should reflect all of those updates. Great, we got John's contact info, everything looking nice and professional here. I've got my sales tax accounted for, total cost, and a signature line. So everything looks good. At this point, I could go ahead and send this over to my customer. To do that, I'm going to just go ahead and exit the preview, get back into Clear Estimates, and go send to customer. See this little envelope, and send report to customer. This is going to pull up a little dialog box where it's going to have a subject line and a body for the email, and it's going to include your proposal as a PDF attachment here. Now, you might be tempted to click into here where it says customer name, company name, and change these to your own customer name and company name. But you actually don't have to. These are what are called variables. This is going to pull your customer's name from the customer's tool, and it's going to pull your company name from your options tool. So when this email gets delivered to your client, it's automatically going to have those details. If you want to see that ahead of time, no problem. Just change this to field up here to your own email address, and you can actually see exactly what the email is going to look like when your client gets it, and just send yourself a copy. So that's how you can actually send the proposal out. And then once we send the proposal out, there's going to be other things we can do. You know, if we wanted to save this completed estimate as a template, we could do that. If we want to begin billing and invoicing, we're going to be able to do that. And of course, we could also duplicate this project. So that is really about what the process looks like. It really just comes down to searching through the library, finding parts, finding templates, creating anything you need, and then just kind of managing the costs here, double checking everything, make sure everything looks good, and then you can very easily send this out to a customer. Next, I'm going to get into the settings and some of the things we didn't get to cover today, but I do want to just double check in with the audience again and see if we have any questions. It looks like I got a question that just came in here a few minutes ago from Jorge, and you're asking, can you mark up info? I'm not sure if I'm following that exactly, but generally you can really mark up just the costs in your project. I'm not sure. Maybe you're talking about individual line item markup here. That is an option. So for any of these parts in your estimate, you can kind of open these up with the pencil. And if you don't want to use the global project markup, and please let me know if this isn't really what you're asking about, Jorge, but you can actually adjust the markup for an individual item as well. So you've got that global project markup, but then within any part, you can mark up these items separately. So let's say I wanted to mark up the material cost for this open riser differently from the rest of the project. You'll see there's a little blue markup button here. And I can click where it says markup in blue. You'll see right here, it's got use project markup. We can uncheck that option. And then I can say, maybe I want to mark up this material 60% for whatever reason. Then I can mark that cost up separately. And I could do the same for labor if I wanted. And then we can go ahead and save it. So now this part uses a different markup setting. And it'll even let you know there'll be kind of a blue dot here. And if you hover over it, it'll give you the markup summary. It's just letting us know the markup's different from the project markup. But yeah, you can mark up individual line items. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking about, but please feel free to clarify. So sorry if I misunderstood your question here. All right. Anything else coming in? Not seeing too much. So a couple of things we did not cover today. Number one was components and alternates. So I'm just going to give you a quick crash course on using components. This is great if you have a multiple phase estimate, especially if you're doing a whole home remodel. Components are going to be super helpful for you. So here's how components work. I can go ahead and create a component just by clicking the plus. Oh, no worries. Yeah, if you do have any other questions, just let me know. And then also I'm going to share out a link at the end if you want to book a call. We could even jump on a call. But that said, let's go ahead and dive into components a little bit here. And we're going to go ahead and click the plus to create a new component. So this is great if you have a multiple room or multiple phase estimate here. And when we click new component, we're going to see that it's going to create this new section. We're still in the same project, but we're no longer in that main estimate. There's no longer any parts here. And we can see it's got component highlighted at the top, and then we can actually title the component here. So let's say we wanted to add on something like, what would make sense for a deck? Maybe they were going to be doing the front porch as well, and we wanted to have a separate section for that. I could just plug in porch here. I can add in an additional description if needed. And then I can go ahead and start adding parts and templates the same way into this specific section of the project for the porch. So let's go ahead and grab add template here. And I'm just going to use one of the porch templates to save us a little bit of time. Let's see what we've got for porches. Replace porch on concrete slab basic. Keep in mind when you click these template descriptions, sometimes it'll have instructions here in the template description. This is actually your instructions that you can kind of look at, or really your description for the template. You can adjust these however you see fit, but it does kind of tell you what's included in the template. And sometimes it has instructions if there's multiple items and you need to select different ones. So just be mindful of what this says. Sometimes there is instructions up here for you how to use the template. Usually what that means is, let's say there's a couple of different types of flooring and you have a choice between removing different styles of flooring. Really all you'd need to do is just uncheck items that you don't need, which is best practice with the template anyway. All of that being said, let's just go ahead and just say, we had just kind of a tiny porch, 70 square feet, calculate. Of course, you'd want to adjust any quantities, kind of fine tune this, and then we can add that template in. And just wanted to add some parts into this component so you can see what this looks like on the proposal. So I'm going to go back to main project. Before we look at the proposal, this is something really important to understand about components. So if you're doing a multiple phase estimate, keep in mind this main projects page is going to show you all of the parts in the estimate, whether they're in a component or not. So you'll see that some of these parts on the far left have C00 to the left of them. And what that is a component code. It lets you know that these parts are in a section or a room of your estimate. And if we scroll down to this components list, we see porch right here. And then we see the value right here of the porch that I already plugged in. So we can see that all of those parts that are in this main estimate are actually in that room component or that section, and we can always just kind of reference which section they're in. So for that reason, to avoid getting confused or maybe deleting a part from the main estimate thinking it's a duplicate, I always suggest if you're doing a multiple room estimate with multiple components, just scroll down to this components list. You'll have them all listed here, and you can just open them up one by one with the pencil. This way we're only looking at each bedroom or each section, or for example, this porch, we're only looking at the porch items at any given time. And then we can always go back to the main project if we want to manage everything else. So that said, let's go ahead and see what components do on a report. So I'm going to go view report and print to PDF. It's going to pull up that proposal again, just so you can get an idea of how this actually works on your report here. Perfect. So now we can see we have a section for the porch. Keep in mind there's an option in your options tool if you want to hide that component code. So that way it just says porch. There is options for that. And then we see all of the line items specific to that porch. And then down here at the bottom, we have a subtotal for the porch. So that's what a component will do. And you can imagine you could have your whole entire estimate built this way with, room 1, room 2, room 3, and a subtotal like this for each. Another thing about components that's kind of cool is that, if you set up a couple of different rooms, you can also save these as templates. You can open up one of these components, save it as a template. You can duplicate a component to a different project. So it's cool. You can copy, move sections around. It's really built to be as flexible as you need it to be. Now, alternates work very similar to components. The only difference is that alternates do not get included in the project cost, and they have their own document you can send out because these are chiefly used for change orders or if you wanted to show some options on your proposal. Very similar process to creating a component. We just click the plus. We can give it a title. Maybe they wanted to see a different style of deck and wanted to know what that would cost, or they changed their mind on something else. We can set up a change order or maybe a couple of different options into an alternate. And then it's got its own document for change orders. And on the proposal, it would just show the cost for this section without including it in the project. So other than that, it works just like a component, just sort of a subsection of your estimate that's not included in the project cost. If you did use this for change orders, you can view report and print to PDF. It'll actually show you a change order document, which you can send over. And then you can sort of choose what your status is. Is the change accepted? Is it declined, undecided? Let's say they accepted a change. You can actually toggle back and forth between alternates and components. So they wanted to go ahead with a change. You send out a change order, they sign it. Then you can convert it to a component if you wanted that included with the project costs. So you could do those. You can kind of toggle those back and forth, alternates and components. So if I click that porch component and I actually wanted to use this as a change order or an option, I can just sort of swap back and forth here. Any questions on that? All right. Next, we didn't cover that contract language at the top of the proposal, and that's always going to be set up here in reports. So reports is where you can export different styles of proposals. You'll see there's different tabs, different pages here. The cost status tab is where you set up invoices and manage payments on the estimate. Obviously, there's a couple of different styles of proposals. And then boilerplate is just another term for legal language, contract language, legalese, any kind of agreement or addendums you want to include on your proposal can be thought of as a boilerplate. Now, when you're in this boilerplate tab, you just want to scroll down here to these bottom two windows here. And this is how you're going to adjust or manipulate your boilerplate. For each of these titles here, these are all separate contracts. And when you first sign up, these are all just examples. They're not real contracts. They're not vetted by any attorney or legal body. Just examples to show you that you can have a couple of different contracts here. But what you'll see as we click the titles of each of these contracts, we see different text pop up here on the right side. So we click these titles and then we can see the text within in the text box. So if we wanted to add in our own legal language here, what we could do, right down here at the bottom, you'll see where it says add heading. We can go ahead and click add heading. And then the next thing I'd want to do is go ahead and click it. And then we're going to see it's going to populate this over here. And then we can give this a title. So maybe I wanted to just call this contract or, agreement or, general conditions, really anything I'd like. I can title that here. And then I'm able to either type or paste my contract language right into this box here. So if you do have that in a PDF or something like this, you could just copy and paste the language here, or just type it in. There is going to be tools if you want to format that contract language. You can also adjust things like the size. And then there's also variables if you want to quickly insert things like the project cost, date, title, first or last name of the client. You're able to do that. If I wanted to click project cost and then click this icon right here, you'll see it's going to add in that variable. And you can just kind of plug in your contract language right here. Now, once we've done that, we just need to tell Clear Estimates where to put our contract. And you'll see that there's, to the left of each of these titles, 3 different checkboxes, P, F, and S. And what that stands for is preliminary, formal, and subcontractor. And as we've discussed, those are your different report styles. Obviously, preliminary and sub reports are printed here. There is a formal report tab, but that's really just kind of a shortcut to what you see on your projects page. So most of the time you use your formal proposal. So you just want to make sure you type in your contract language here, and then you can just make sure you select F most commonly, or really any of the proposals that you want to see that language on. Now, when I was looking at my proposal earlier, I was seeing this general conditions language that I added in. I know that because that's checked in my F column for my formal proposal. That said, you have a choice between an intro and an outro boilerplate. Now, intro is going to be anything before the line items in the project. So this is basically the top of the proposal. And outro is anything below the project content. So this is going to be things like that signature line or any of this acceptance of proposal language. This can all be adjusted right here in the outro. So you have intro and outro boilerplates. Outros land at the end, intros land at the beginning. So you can always make those adjustments here to any of that, and that'll translate to all your reports. Very good. No questions that I'm seeing so far. Just last thing I think I want to cover today before I give you some time back here is just your account options. So there's a lot of report-related settings, account-related settings up here in the top right corner in options. So let's just go through a few of these. So here in the options tool, this is of course where you can set up your company logo or swap it out. So if I click options, it takes me right to company info. And if I wanted to plug in a different logo, or if I didn't select one when I signed up, I can just click set company logo, and then I would just choose a file from my drive. Once you select that file, it'll stage it here for you, and then you just want to scroll down to the very bottom right and click save. This is the most important step. This is how you finish the logo import. So if you're having trouble with logo import, just always make sure you scroll down, click save. That should update the logo. You'll also have choices for things like the positioning as well as the size of the logo. Generally try to keep your logo about the size you want to see it on the report when you upload it, but you do have some customizability there as well. Below that's all of the the contact info that appears on my contract. So this is my street address, my license number, city, state, zip, phone, and email. So you can always adjust any of this info here. Once again, just make sure to click save after just about anything you do here. In the menu on the left, second option down is going to be our labor rate editor. And this is how you can adjust default labor rates for your account. So if you have different rates that you want to use, you don't want to use our suggested rates, that's totally fine. You could just click into this labor rate editor. Rather than doing this part by part, this is going to globally update all of your labor rates if we do it from this page. Here, what you'll see at the top is suggested labor rates for your market. So these aren't the labor rates that are being used by your account, although they will be preloaded for you if you just signed up. It's going to populate these suggested rates, but it's always just going to show you what the suggested rates are for your area for these different trades. Now you do want to hover over this rate blue text here. It's going to give you a little info about what's included, and it emphasizes that it doesn't include overhead or profit, and it lets you know that they're not assumed to be sourced from subcontractors except in very specific cases. So a little information about the labor rates. If you want to get a better understanding of what's included, you can always just come into options, labor rate editor, hover over this. It'll give you some info. And then we see the suggested rates for Ann Arbor. And this is going to correspond to whatever location you have set up in your update tool. It'll show you the suggested rates for that market. However, down below, we're going to actually see what rates the account is using. Now, in my case, I'm using the suggested rates, and those are preloaded for me. But if I wanted to make adjustments, I can do that here on this page just by clicking into this rate column and making adjustments for the truck driver, for the general laborer, tile setter, concrete worker, carpenter, and so on, painter. We can make adjustments to any of these rates. What's important you don't do here is don't delete these rates. The reason is all of these rates are tied back to all the parts in your part library. So if you start deleting rates, that can cause issues. So instead, just click into that rate column. I want to change this to $46 an hour for a trucker. I can just change that here and then just save changes. And now any parts that use that rate are going to be updated automatically going forward. So next time I add one of those parts to a project, it would use my updated rates. So just once again, make sure you save changes here. If you wanted to add more labor rates really to choose from, you can just click Add New Record here. This will just give you a blank column here, blank row, I should say. And it just needs a letter, a title, and a rate. And then you can just save those changes, and then those will be available for you to select in a project. Very cool. Any questions on labor rates or customizing those? No questions. All right. A couple of positions down here, we're going to get into report settings. So I'm going to go into report settings general. This is how you can adjust things like the font, the color of the text in your proposals, the size of the font. You can kind of adjust that text size here. And this is also where if you ever wanted to backdate a proposal, you can uncheck this option to use the current date. And then in your more drop down in your project, you could select a different date. If you wanted to backdate an estimate, you can do that as well. Once again, after any changes here, just make sure you click save. And then you'll have individual settings pages for each of your different reports, preliminary, formal, and subcontractor. If I click into formal proposal, we can see what kind of options we'd have for that. You can pick and choose if you do want your logo included or not, as well as things like the submitted to and by section. So that's once again your customers' details and your own. You can hide the project cost if you wanted. Like I was saying earlier, the sub proposal doesn't even have a project cost by default. So you might want to lean on that one instead, but you can always turn that option off if you wanted. You can also do things like hide subtotals. There's a lot of customization depending on how you want these reports to look. Let's say you set up an estimate by component, but you didn't want it organized that way on the proposal, you can uncheck this option. Or there's other component related settings. Maybe I don't want to see the component subtotals. I can hide those. I can also hide the line items in component. That would make it, for that porch example, it would just say porch and have a total. You can hide the line items in those components. You can include the cost of each individual line item by default if you wanted. That would show the after markup costs for each individual line in the report. And then there's also financing options if you wanted to offer financing to your client. Then down here at the bottom, you can customize the report title if you don't want it to say formal proposal. You can adjust that. You can adjust the project specifications title. All of that's possible right here. Once again, we're in options and formal proposal. And we just want to make sure we save after any changes. Under the preferences section here in your options tool, I'm going to go ahead and draw your attention to a couple of things. There is rounding options. If you want to round your base bid, you can make it kind of round itself off to the nearest dollar, $10, $100. Make sure you click save there after you change any of that. We do have an option if you wanted to have some kind of a project numbering system. You can create that here in this project number manager. If you did want to set up a project number for your estimates to use. And then under miscellaneous, this is where you can adjust things like the default markup. So maybe I always use a 60% markup rather than 50, or maybe it's any combination of markups. We can kind of set this by default, so that way every time we create a new estimate, it knows to use our markups. So we can set that up here. This is also where you can add something like sales tax. If I wanted a default line for sales tax, that's always included with every new project, I can just set this up here and then go ahead and save it. And then each new project I would create beyond that would use 50% markup. It would have that sales tax item. So some of these things you can kind of do by default right in here. And then lastly, under integrations, this is where you could do things like log into QuickBooks Online. Our QuickBooks integration is really just used for invoicing. So it just sends over the project totals, just material, labor, and sub. But you can log into QuickBooks Online, send your costs over to there. This is also if you do get set up with payable invoicing, which we offer through our partner company Clearant. This is where you could plug in your API. That way your invoices you send out have a payment terminal for your client. Interested in any of that information, I'm going to share my email and my phone here at the end of the presentation if you have any questions on that. And then finally, under your account, this is where you can do things. If you're a pro user, you can add multiple users to your account. This is also where you could do things like change your password, or if you wanted to upgrade your plan, you could do that in managed subscription as well. All right. And I think that's about everything we really need to cover in here, barring any questions. Let me just go ahead and take a look back at the chat messenger, see if anyone has any questions. All right. Still not seeing too much. So that really kind of wraps up the presentation today. I know we covered a lot. At this point, I'm going to share out a couple of additional resources for you. So let's go ahead and jump back into my slideshow. Number one, if you're interested in setting up a one-on-one training call with us, feel free to do so. You can actually scan this QR code with your phone. It'll take you right to our schedule, where you can schedule some time with us. There's really no limit to these calls. You can book as many training calls as you need. It's about a 30-minute call. We'll just connect to your screen, walk you through the system, make sure your questions get answered. And then I'm also going to share a direct link to my calendar in the chat messenger as well. If you'd like to book some time with me, please feel free to do so. Or you can do that at clearestimates.com/call schedule. Now, if you haven't signed up, if you're just kind of previewing the software, just wanted to see how it worked today, feel free to sign up for a 30-day free trial. It is the full version of Clear Estimates, free for 30 days. It gets a really good opportunity to try out the system to really its fullest extent. You can scan this QR code with your phone. It'll take you right to our checkout page, or you just go to clearestimates.com. You'll see a start free trial option right there. And lastly, if you have more questions about the presentation, if there's still anything unclear, maybe you have suggestions for future presentations you'd like to see us cover, or if you just have questions about the software overall, and you need that calendar link sent over, just reach out to me. You can reach out to us at support@clearestimates.com. Also, if you're working in Clear Estimates, there is going to be a little blue chat messenger right down here. We're available for live support 9 to 5 Eastern. Just feel free to send us over a message, and we'd be more than happy to jump on, make sure we can address any questions you have, and anything that's giving you trouble. So I do want to thank everybody so much for joining in today. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Like I said, we do these every month, and you can feel free to book some time with me as well. And thanks so much again for joining in. I hope everyone has a spectacular weekend. And thanks again. We'll catch you